Hello, good afternoon. Welcome back to our NBAE, Adult Education, Reading and Writing for Adults. This is lesson 4, and today we're going to do some spelling rules. Again, spelling rules can be, boring sometimes, but if you get them down, they really do help you pronounce a word. And as I've said before, sometimes if you can pronounce it, you've definitely heard it before and you can connect it to something else. So it really does help with your reading, and like I say, it's worth the effort. So last week we were talking about words that ended in GH and OUGH. We saw that little clip with the Isle of Lucy show with Ricky not being able to pronounce some of those words. So you can see just from that clip that there are spelling rules, but there's always exceptions to the rules. So it's kind of, some of them you have to memorize. But today I'm going to give you some tips on some of the rules that usually you can count on when you run into certain letter combinations. After that, we're going to be, I'm going to be introducing you to a book that is it's one of my favorite books, and it's The Outsiders. A lot of you may have heard of this book. I loved it so much that I also got the movie. So our class, I have put this book online in our course on Canvas so that you can read it. You don't have to go out and buy it. You can read it chapter by chapter, and we'll see how far we get today. But I just love this book, and it was written in 1967 by a 15-year-old teenage girl, and it's a lot of us love this book. So let's get started. I'm going to be doing a lot of work on the whiteboard today because it's and I'm not going to give you all the spelling rules, but meet me over at the whiteboard and we'll get started. So the first rules I want to start with are the double letter rules. With last week I had some rules that the word little I used. It's also part of this. I haven't got any double T's on here, but these are the rules that you see most often. They start with, they're words that have a double L, a double S, a double F in them. And they come at the end of a one-syllable word. So if the word ends in one vowel, immediately followed by an L, an S, or an F, you add that letter twice. So if you look at this first one, we're using the word hill. So you say to yourself when you see that word or you're spelling that word, does it have two L's in it? Well, if you wrote H-I-L, that's what they're saying. The word has one vowel, then a consonant, and then you have to, and if it ends with an L, it needs two L's. Underneath those words, these are all double L words. Fell, mull, fill, those are the double L examples. You have to add that extra L. Same goes for the S's. If the word is like miss or lass, kiss, and chess, they have to have two S's. Over here, this goes for F's. Puff, a powder puff, a whiff of smoke, to buff something when you're waxing your car, and the word off. There's also Z words that are down below. So these are words that you may or may not have heard, but some of them, the word fuzz on a sweater, buzz, fizz in a soda, razzmatazz, something like that, and then you have jazz. So it's a vowel, and this word it's an A, with a consonant at the end, and if it's an L, an S, an F, or a Z, those words, that's the rule for those double letters at the end of a word. Okay? The second rule I want to show you really goes with what we were talking about last week with syllables. Some words have to have double letters because they're keeping the vowels in the section of the word short or long. So, oops, let me make sure this is not crooked for you. The opposite way. No, that got the other way. There we go. So as I said, to retain the short vowel sound, these words are usually two-syllable words. If you say the word rabbit, you can hear there's two sounds. Oh, why is this not doing it? There we go. It's still crooked. There you go. All right, so rabbit. We have R-A-B, and then the second syllable is B-I-T, and both of those have a vowel inside that are what we're calling short sound. Rabbit, I'm sorry, rabbit. Those are the two syllables in that word. So it has to, when it's all written together as one word, it has to have the two B's, because those closed in. It goes with that closed vowel, closed consonant, vowel, consonant, closed syllable sound. So two B's. For traffic, it's two F's. For bunny, we have two N's, lobby, bubble, fiddle, two D's, carrot, two R's, barrel, two R's. So you're going by a syllable rule there that helps you spell the word correctly. The third rule that I've got for us to look at uses the terms prefix and suffix. Prefixes are letters that are grouped to go before what is a root word or after a root word, and I'll explain further. When you add a prefix to a word, it comes before what is called a root word. So down here where we have the word spell, the word spell is the root word. Can you spell this word? But if I wrote it incorrectly, I could say, oh my, I misspelled it. So when you're putting a prefix before a word that ends with the same letter, it ends up having two of the same letter. So miss at the end of the prefix miss means not. It's added to spell, which starts with an S. So you don't get rid of either S. This prefix all by itself, M-I-S, means not spelled correctly. So when you add miss to the root word spell, you keep both of those S's because one is the root word spell and the other one is the prefix miss. So you end up with misspell. That's another case where you would use the double letters inside a word. The first rule, it was at the end of the word. But with this is the reason why there's two S's. Miss is its own kind of word by itself, and so is spell. But together, they mean not spelled correctly. Same way with dis. If you're giving service, good service to someone, if you're giving disservice, it means you've done something wrong. You're not doing something good for someone. So you keep, dis also means not good service, not good service. So those two put together, it's a disservice. It was of no service to me that happened. It was a disservice that you didn't call me back. Two S's, double letters. If in this one, the root word is nerve. That didn't bother me one bit. I have very good nerves. But that unnerved me. Un means, again, I didn't have any nerve. That really got me shook up. And you end up with the word unnerve, 2 N's. So that's a prefix rule. Now those are ones that come before what I'm calling a root word: spell, service, nerve. That's the root word. It's the meaning I want to give. But when you add those prefixes, it changes the meaning of the word, but the spelling goes along with what those prefixes are. Now I'm going to talk about the suffix part of this rule. Okay, so suffixes come after a root word. And I'm just going to give you one word that explains what we're trying to say. They're added to the end of the word. And again, the same sort of thing applies. With the word thin, if I say, boy, she's gotten really thin, that means she's lost weight. I can say the thinness, though, has made her rather attractive. So I'm changing the kind of word I'm referring to her weight and that she lost weight, but I'm also changing the way the word is used. So the ending word here of thin, the N, and the suffix ness becomes thinness with 2 N's. That's why that word has the 2 N's. Because thin is one word, it's the root word. Ness is a suffix. It means the condition of being thin. With this word, we have hopeful. I'm very hopeful that that will work out. If you then change and want to say, well, hopefully it'll happen. This hopeful is the root word. It has its own meaning. ly is a suffix that makes it actually an adverb. And because it ended in L, the suffix is ly, you just add it to it, and you end up with 2 L's there. Now these, for number 4, there are letters that are never doubled. And you can refer to this if you're wondering. We now have talked about L's, S's, F's, what else? Z's. And we've also talked about a few other words that have to do with suffixes and prefixes. But these letters are never doubled. So if you're wondering about an H, a J, K, V, a W, or an X, and a Y, they're never doubled in words. So like I say, these are going to be on the website for my students that are enrolled in, they're on Canvas, on your Canvas class for Wednesday, ABE, Language Arts. And you'll always be able to refer to them if you're writing anything from a letter to an assignment, and you can double check it. I know when you're writing, it's hard to find sometimes, well, how do you spell this word? And it can get to you. Luckily, you can look it up sometimes if you have your phone or your computer or whatever handy. But these will always be there on your course. Let's move on. So some people will have trouble, including me. I'm always looking for the right spelling of things. And actually, I'd like to say a little bit about that. Why do we care if we're spelling correctly when we write something? Well, people seem to always have a stereotype that if you can't spell, if something is misspelled and they notice that you've misspelled something, it seems to be that people think you're not smart. And that's not the case. From time, at the very beginning of our country, a lot of our presidents couldn't spell, and a lot of people who just had to start writing things down. These spelling rules sort of come in, and academics know what the spelling rules are, and copywriters for newspapers and things like that. But if you can spell right, it gives a good presentation of what you actually know. Good spelling is like good hygiene. You know, you don't want your fingers with dirt on them and your fingernails and things like that. If you can spell correctly, people are going to read what you have to say and say they know what they're talking about. Whether it's true or not, it seems to be a stereotype. So please think about your spelling. Always correct your typing with spell check and whatnot if you're on a computer. But these spelling rules, just if you practice them, you'll remember them more clearly. So here are the spelling rules for plurals, for words. So most nouns, and when I say for plural words, if a word is one thing, that's singular. If it's more than one thing, it's plural. So I've given you an example in number 1. So there's one bug, and this one is 2 bugs. This is the plural. Bugs is the plural of bug. And in that case, you just add the S. Now it starts getting tricky. Number 2 rule for plural words is that nouns that end in S, X, Z, CH, and SH, you have to add an ES. So you could have 1 inch, but if there's more than one, it's inches. You add an ES. Boxes has an X, it ends in ES. So think of all the words that end in an S, an X, a Z, a CH, or an SH. Those are the words that you need to put ES on. Number 3, nouns that end in Y if Y is at the end. So 1 donkey, you get an S. 1 boy, you add more than that, you get boys. Now it gets tricky with the Ys. Nouns that end in Y, a noun that ends in Y, that is part of that diphthong or digraph syllable. Now and I'm using those big academic words, but the diphthong, remember, was like a vowel with another consonant or another vowel. If it's at the end of that word, you change the Y to an I and add ES. So let me show you that. So a word like baby, you take the Y away, and you have to change the Y and make it into babies. Company, again, that kind of a word. You've got Abby, Annie. Those are diphthongs. It's a vowel A with 2 consonants in both of those words, and it's part of the sound that they are joining those letters together to make a sound. Abby. It has to go together. Those 3 letters have to go together. It's part of that vowel, consonant, consonant combination. And in the word company, it's A-N-Y-N-E, company. So that Y goes away when it's more than one company and becomes companies. Now, here are the exceptions to the rules. Some nouns that end in FE or F change to V, and you add ES. Why? I have no idea, but it's the rule. So if you have 1 shelf put up for your bookshelf, when you're completed, you might have 4 shelves. Notice you take the F out when it's plural, and you add a V, ES. So things that end with F, you take away the F when it becomes a plural word. So 1 leaf, but more leaves are falling. Take out the F and you put the VES. Here's another exception to the rules we've said. Some nouns that end in O add ES rather than S. So the word veto gets the spelling of vetoes. You add an ES, not an S. Let me just slow it down a little bit here. So some nouns now, this is the next part of this. Some nouns change completely. There's no adding of S's or ES's or changing Y's or F's or anything like that. For the plural sounds of some words, you get totally different words. So, you might have at this time of year one mouse coming into your house. You don't want a lot of mice. There's not mouses in your house. It changes to mice. You might have, when you're measuring things, you have a foot as a measurement, but there might be 9 feet. Your living room might be 9 feet wide. It changes from foot to feet. Combinations of, so there's many more of these. And sometimes I didn't put this down, I didn't even think of it. But some words, the singular and the plural are the same. So you would have a deer, there's a deer in your backyard, and there are deer in the backyard. So that word stays the same. So a lot of rules, a lot of different rules. This is an interesting one that I think we're aware of, but again, sometimes when we're going to spell something, we don't even remember it. So there's different ways to spell the sound k. You can say cat, that sound is the beginning of cat, and you spell that word with a C. You can also say kite, but that word starts with a K. And it's the same sound, kite, cat. You can hear it. You can also, at the end of a word, hear that K sound. If you use the letter combination of C and K together, so it would be sock. So you hear that K sound. But there's 3 different ways to present it in a word. That's just kind of an interesting sound. There's others like that too, so watch out for those. If we go down lower, these diphthongs, that's what they're called. You don't need to remember that, but letter combinations of O and I and O and Y, there's rules for those. So if you have an OI in a word, it's used in the beginning or middle of a word, like boil, broil, spoil, ointment. Those are always OI, not OY. Okay. Okay. The same sound though, oi, OI, or O, oi, OY, you use OY at the end of a word. So the word employ would be OY. Boy is OY, and enjoy is OY, not the OI. The other combinations with O are OW and OU. OW, if it's followed by a single N, an L, an ER, or an EL at the end of the word, it's OW. So you hear the word town, growl, tower, towel, and the word cow. OU is used at the beginning or the middle of a word. In a word such as out, again, it's the same sound though, if you hear it. Out is used in the beginning or middle of a word. Out, stout, our, or the word ground. So those are some of those rules that will help you in spelling those better. So let me now move on to our book that I want to introduce you to, and it's The Outsiders. Let me put this. So you can see it right here. Now, hopefully some of you have seen the movie, and this is the movie, and there were really a lot of up-and-coming stars in this movie. Patrick Swayze, Tom Cruise was in it, the Karate Kid, can't remember his name, but he's in it, Rob Lowe's in it, and they were all a group of kids that this woman named S.E. Hinton wrote about who were in her high school. And they are called The Outsiders. And the reason I want you to be reading this book in my class, let me just take this down and I'll get you started, is that some of the books that I was showing you at the very beginning of these classes are very interesting, and I want you to get used to reading just for the fun of reading. There are fiction books and there are nonfiction articles and books. With the nonfiction books, you need to understand something, or it's teaching you something. But with the fiction books, there's usually a lesson that the author is trying to give you about something they've learned in life. And with The Outsiders, I always thought it was a very important lesson. In the book, there are a cast of characters, and they're young teenage kids. They are on the wrong side of the track. They also have formed their own little gang, but the gang that they have, the message of the book actually is that they have a gang and they're poorer than the other gang in the town on the good side of the track. And the gang that are the wealthy kids are really seen as totally different than this group that is called the Greasers. The Greasers wear dungaree jackets, dungarees, or leather jackets. Some of them ride motorcycles. Most of them walk everywhere. And they're the outsiders of society. They kind of like their situation, though they think they have much harder lives than the people that are called the Socias, and it stands for the social group, who dress better. They have haircuts every now and then. The Greasers, most of you, if you were in school in the 60s, some of us were, they have the look of what came on later as Fonzie and Happy Days. They had the slicked down hairdo, and they used all this Vaseline. Their hair was long, but they've slicked back their hair into what we used to call DAs. And as I say, there were reasons, a lot of reasons. The families for the Greasers, the mother of one family has died, mother and father. And by the time you get to the end of The Outsiders, you're going to realize the message of the book. And the message of the book actually is that everybody's the same. The people who are rich and they're living in these homes and they have all these really nice cars, classic cars we'd call them today, they're having just as hard a time as the Greasers are, but in different ways. So I'd like to read the first chapter for you, get you started on this. And there's a lot of references to the time period in the 60s. So for some of you who lived during this time, you'll understand the references. I'll be helping the rest of you that were not living through this time. But for those of you who are older, you'll get more of the references and we'll talk about it. One of the other things I did mention a little bit about the hairstyles for the Greasers. Hair is a really important thing in how people dress and how people look, because there's that stereotypical, if you've got long hair, you're a hood or a thug or something like that. But if you've got like a classic look or a classic car even, well, you're better than the ones that don't dress well and have a different way of life. So let's begin. When I stepped out into the bright sunlight from the darkness of the movie house, I had only two things on my mind: Paul Newman and a ride home. I was wishing I looked like Paul Newman. He looks tough and I don't. But I guess my own looks aren't so bad. I have light brown, almost red hair and greenish gray eyes. I wish they were more gray because I hate most guys that have green eyes, but I have to be content with what I have. My hair is longer than a lot of boys wear theirs, squared off in the back and long at the front and sides, but I'm a greaser, and most of my neighborhood rarely bothers to get a haircut. Besides, I look better with long hair. I had a long walk home and no company, but I usually loan it anyway, for no reason except that I like to actually watch the movies, undisturbed, so I can get into them and live them with the actors. When I see a movie with someone, it's kind of uncomfortable, like having someone read your book over your shoulder. I'm different that way. I mean, my second oldest brother, Soda, who is 16 going on 17, never cracks a book at all. And my oldest brother, Darryl, who we call Darry, he works too long and hard to be interested in a story or drawing a picture, so I'm not like them either. And nobody in our gang digs movies and books the way I do. For a while there, I thought I was the only person in the world that did, so I loaned it. Soda tries to understand at least, which is more than Darry does. But then Soda is different from anybody. He understands everything almost, like he's never hollering at me all the time the way Darry is, or treating me as if I was 6 instead of 14. I love Soda more than I've ever loved anyone, even Mom and Dad. He's always happy-go-lucky and grinning, while Darry's hard and firm and rarely grins at all. But then Darry's gone through a lot in his 20 years. He's grown up too fast. Sodapop will never grow up at all. I don't know which way's the best. I'll find out one of these days myself. Anyway, I went on walking home, thinking about the movie, and suddenly wishing I had some company. Greasers can't walk alone too much or they'll get jumped, or someone will come up and scream, "Hey, greaser," at them, which doesn't make it feel too hot, if you know what I mean. We get jumped by the socias. I'm not sure how you spell it, but it's the abbreviation for the socials, the jet set, the West Side rich kids. It's like the term greaser, which is used to class all us boys on the East Side. We're poorer than the socias in the middle class. I reckon we're wilder too. Not like the socias who jump greasers and wreck houses and throw beer blasts for kicks and get editorials in the paper for being a public disgrace one day and an asset to society the next. Greasers are almost like hoods. We still steal things and drive old souped up cars and hold up gas stations and have a gang fight once in a while. I don't mean I do things like that. Darry would kill me if I got into trouble with the police. Since Mom and Dad were killed in an auto wreck, the three of us get to stay together only as long as we behave. So Soda and I stay out of trouble as much as we can, and we're careful not to get caught when we can't. I only mean that most greasers do things like that, just like we wear our hair long and dress in blue jeans and t-shirts, or leave our shirt tails out and wear leather jackets and tennis shoes or boots. I'm not saying that either soc or greasers are better. That's just the way things are. I could have waited to go to the movies until Darry or Sodapop got off work. They would have gone with me, or driven me there, or walked along. Although Soda just can't sit still long enough to enjoy a movie, and they bore Darry to death. Darry thinks his life is enough without inspecting other people's, Or I could have gotten one of the gang to come along, one of the 4 boys Darry and Soda and I have grown up with and consider family. We're almost as close as brothers. When you grow up in a tight-knit neighborhood like ours, you get to know each other real well. If I had thought about it, I could have called Darry and he would have come by on his way home and picked me up. Or Two-Bit Matthews, one of our gang, would have come to get me in his car if I had asked him. But sometimes I just don't use my head. It drives my brother Darry nuts when I do stuff like that, because I'm supposed to be smart. I make good grades and I have a high IQ and everything, but I don't use my head. But besides, I like walking. I about decided I didn't like it so much, though, when I spotted that red Corvair trailing me. I was almost 2 blocks from home then, so I started walking a little faster. I had never been jumped, but I had seen Johnny after 4 Socs got a hold of him, and it wasn't pretty. Johnny was scared of his own shadow after that. Johnny was 16 then. I knew it wasn't any use, though, the fast walking. I mean, even before the Corvair pulled up beside me and 5 Socs got out. I got pretty scared. I'm kind of small for 14, even though I have a good build, and those guys were bigger than me. I automatically hitched my thumbs in my jeans and slouched, wondering if I could get away if I made a break for it. I remembered Johnny, his face all cut up and bruised, and I remembered how he had cried when we found him, half conscious in the corner lot. Johnny had it awful rough at home. It took a lot to make him cry. I was sweating something fierce, although I was cold. I could feel my palms getting clammy and the perspiration running down my back. I get like that when I'm real scared. I glanced around for a pop bottle or a stick or something. Steve Randall, Soda's best buddy, had once held off 4 guys with a busted pop bottle. But there was nothing, so I stood there like a bump on a log while they surrounded me. I don't use my head. They walked around slowly, silently, smiling. "Hey, Grease," one said in an over-friendly voice. "We're going to do you a favor, Greaser. We're going to cut all that long, greasy hair off." He had on a Madras shirt. I can still see it, blue Madras. One of them laughed, then cussed me out in a low voice. I couldn't think of anything to say. There just isn't a whole lot you can say while waiting to get mugged, so I kept my mouth shut. "You need a haircut, Greaser?" The medium-sized blonde pulled a knife out of his back pocket and flipped the blade open. I finally thought of something to say. "No, I was backing away from that knife. No, I don't want a haircut." Of course, I backed right into one of them. They had me down in a second. They had my arms and legs pinned down, and one of them was sitting on my chest with his knees on my elbows. And if you don't think that hurts, you're crazy. I could smell English leather, shaving lotion, and stale tobacco, and I wondered foolishly if I would suffocate before they did anything. I was scared so bad I was wishing I would. I fought to get loose and almost did for a second. Then they tightened up on me, and the one on my chest slugged me a couple of times, so I lay still, swearing at them between gasps. A blade was held against my throat. "How'd you like that haircut to begin just below your chin?" It occurred to me then that they could kill me. I went wild. I started screaming for Soda, Darry, anyone. Someone put his hand over my mouth, and I bit it as hard as I could, tasting the blood running through my teeth. I heard a muttered curse and got slugged again. And they were stuffing a handkerchief in my mouth. One of them kept saying, "Shut him up, for Pete's sake, shut him up." Then there were shouts and the pounding of feet, and the Socs jumped up and left me lying there gasping. I lay there and I wondered, what in the world was happening? People were jumping over me and running by me, and I was too dazed to figure it out. Then someone had me under the armpits and was hauling me to my feet. It was Darry. "Are you all right, pony boy?" He was shaking me, and I wished he'd stop. I was dizzy enough anyway. I could tell it was Darry, though, partly because of the voice and partly because Darry's always rough with me without meaning to be. "I'm okay. Quit shaking me, Darry. I'm okay." He stopped instantly. I'm sorry. He wasn't really. Darry isn't ever sorry for anything he does. It seems funny to me that he should look just exactly like my father and act exactly the opposite of him. My father was only 40 when he died, and he looked 25, and a lot of people thought Darry and Dad were brothers instead of father and son, but they only looked alike. My father was never rough with anyone without meaning to be. Darry is 6'2" and broad-shouldered and muscular. He has dark brown hair that kicks out in front and a slight cowlick in the back, just like Dad's, but Darry's are his own. He's got eyes that are like two pieces of pale blue-green ice. They've got a determined set in them, like the rest of him. He looks older than 20, tough, cool, and smart. He would be real handsome if his eyes weren't so cold. He doesn't understand anything that is not plain hard fact, but he uses his head. I sat down again, rubbing my cheek where I'd been slugged the most. Darry jammed his fists in his pockets. They didn't hurt you too bad, did they? They did. I was smarting and aching, and my chest was sore, and I was so nervous my hands were shaking, and I wanted to start bawling. But you just don't say that to Darry. I'm okay. Sodapop came loping back, but by then I had figured that all the noise I had heard was the gang coming to rescue me. He dropped down beside me, examining my head. You got cut up a little, huh, pony boy? I only looked at him blankly. I did? He pulled out a handkerchief, wet the end of it with his tongue, and pressed it gently against the side of my head. You're bleeding like a stuffed pig. I am? Look. He showed me the handkerchief, reddened as if by magic. Did they pull a blade on you? I remembered the voice. Need a haircut, greaser? The blade, I remembered the blade must have slipped while he was trying to shut me up. Yeah. Soda is handsomer than anyone else I know. Not like Darry. Soda's movie star kind of handsome, the kind that people stop on the street to watch go by. He's not as tall as Darry, and he's a little slimmer, but he has a finely drawn, sensitive face that somehow manages to be reckless and thoughtful at the same time. He's got dark gold hair that he combs back, long and silky and straight, and in the summer the sun bleaches it to the shining wheat gold. His eyes are dark brown, lively, dancing, recklessly laughing eyes that can be gentle and sympathetic one moment and blazing with anger the next. He has Dad's eyes, but Soda is one of a kind. He can get drunk in a drag race or dancing without ever getting near alcohol. In our neighborhood, it's rare to find a kid who doesn't drink once in a while, but Soda never touches a drop. He doesn't need to. He gets drunk on just plain living, and he understands everybody. He looked at me more closely. I looked away hurriedly, because if you want to know the truth, I was starting to bawl like a baby. I knew I was as white as I felt, and I was shaking like a leaf. Soda just put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Easy, pony boy. They ain't gonna hurt you no more." I know, I said, but the ground began to blur, and I felt hot tears running down my cheeks. I brushed them away impatiently. I'm just a little spooked, that's all. I drew a quivering breath and quit crying. You just don't cry in front of Darry, not unless you're hurt like Johnny had been that day we found him in the vacant lot. Compared to Johnny, I wasn't hurt at all. Soda rubbed my hair. You're an okay kid, Pony. I had to grin at him. Soda can make you grin no matter what. I guess it's because he's always grinning so much himself. You're crazy, Soda, out of your mind. Darry looked as if he'd like to knock our heads together. You're both nuts. Soda merely cocked one eyebrow, a trick he'd picked up from Two-Bit. It seems to run in this family. Darry stared at him for a second, then cracked a grin. Sodapop isn't afraid of him like everyone else and enjoys teasing him. I'd just as soon tease a full-grown grizzly myself, but for some reason, Darry seems to like being teased by Soda. Our gang had chased the Socias to their car and heaved rocks at them. They came running toward us now, 4 lean, hard guys. They were all as tough as nails and looked it. I had grown up with them, and they accepted me, even though I was younger, because I was Darry and Soda's kid brother, and I kept my mouth shut. Steve Randall was 17, tall and lean, with thick, greasy hair. He kept combed in complicated swirls. He was cocky, smart, and Soda's best buddy since grade school. Steve's specialty was cars. He could lift a hubcap quicker and more quietly than anyone in the neighborhood, but he also knew cars upside down and backward. But he also knew, he could drive anything on wheels. He and Soda worked at the same gas station, Steve part-time and Soda full-time, and their station got more customers than any other in town. Whether that was because Steve was so good with cars or because Soda attracted girls like honey draws flies, I couldn't tell you. I liked Steve only because he was Soda's best friend. He didn't like me. He thought I was a tag-along and a kid. Soda always took me with them when they went places if they weren't taking girls, and that bugged Steve. It wasn't my fault. Soda always asked me. I didn't ask him. Soda doesn't think I'm a kid. Two-Bit Matthews was the oldest of the gang and the wisecracker of the bunch. He was about 6 feet tall, stocky in build, and very proud of his long, rusty-colored sideburns. He had gray eyes and a wide grin, and he couldn't stop making funny remarks to save his life. You couldn't shut up that guy. He always had to get his 2 bits worth in, hence his name. Even his teachers had forgotten his real name, and it was Keith, and we hardly remembered he had one. Life was one big joke to 2-Bit. He was famous for shoplifting and his black-handled switchblade, which he couldn't have acquired without his first talent. And he was always smarting off to the cops. He really couldn't help it. Everything he said was so irresistibly funny that he just had to let the police in on it to brighten up their dull lives. That's the way he explained it to me. He liked fights, blondes, and for some unfathomable reason, school. He was still a junior at 18 and a half, and he had never learned anything. He just went for kicks. I liked him real well because he kept us laughing at ourselves as well as other things. He reminded me of Will Rogers. Maybe it was the grin. If I had to pick the real character of the gang, it would be Dallas, though. Dallas Winston. That was his name, but we called him Dally. I used to like to draw his picture when he was in a dangerous mood, for then I could get his personality down in a few lines. He had an elfish face with high cheekbones and a pointed chin, small, sharp animal teeth, and ears like a lynx. His hair was almost white, it was so blonde, and he didn't like haircuts or hair oil either, so it fell over his forehead in wisps and kicked out in the back in tufts and curled behind his ears and along the nape of his neck. His eyes were blue, blazing ice cold, with a hatred of the whole world. Dally had spent 3 years on the wild side of New York and had been arrested at the age of 10. He was tougher than the rest of us, tougher, colder, meaner. The shade of difference that separates a greaser from a hood wasn't present in Dally. He was as wild as the boys in the downtown outfits, like Tim Shepard's gang. In New York, Dally blew off steam in gang fights, but here, organized gangs are rarities. There are just small bunches of friends who stick together, and the warfare is between the social classes. A rumble, when it's called, is usually born of a grudge fight, and the opponents just happen to bring their friends along. Oh, there are a few named gangs around, like the River Kings and the Tiber Street Tigers, but here in the Southwest, there's no gang rivalry. So Dally, even though he could get into a good fight sometimes, had no specific thing to hate. No rival gang, only Socias. And you can't win against them no matter how hard you try anyway, because they've got all the breaks, and even whipping them isn't going to change that fact. Maybe that was why Dallas was so bitter. He had quite a reputation. They have a file of him down at the police station. He had been arrested, he got drunk, he rode in rodeos, lied, cheated, stole, rolled drunks, jumped small kids. He did everything. I didn't like him, but he was smart, and you had to respect him. Johnny Cade was the last and least. If you can picture a little dark puppy that has been kicked too many times and is lost in a crowd of strangers, you'll have Johnny. He was the youngest, next to me, smaller than the rest, with a slight build. He had big black eyes and a dark tanned face. His hair was jet black and heavily greased and combed to the side, but it was so long that it fell in shaggy bangs across his forehead. He was a nervous, suspicious look, had a nervous, suspicious look in his eyes, and that beating he got from the Socias didn't help matters. He was the gang's pet, everyone's kid brother. His father always beating him up, and his mother ignored him, except when she was hacked off at something, and then you could hear her yelling at him clear down at our house. I think he hated that worse than getting whipped. He would have run away 1,000,000 times if we hadn't been there. If it hadn't been for the gang, Johnny would never have known what love and affection were. I wiped my eyes hurriedly. Did you catch him? Nope, they got away this time, the dirty two-bit went on cheerfully, calling the Socias every name he could think of or make up. The kid's okay? I'm okay. I tried to think of something to say. I'm usually pretty quiet around people, even the gang. I changed the subject. I didn't know you were out of the cooler yet, Dally. Good behavior. I got off early. Dallas lit a cigarette and handed it to Johnny. Everyone sat down to have a smoke and relax. A smoke always lessens the tension. I had quit trembling and my color was back. The cigarette was calming me down. Two-Bit cocked an eyebrow. Nice looking bruise you got there, kid. I touched my cheek gingerly. Really? Two-Bit nodded sagely. Nice cut, too. Makes you look tough. Tough, T-O-U-G-H, and tough, T-U-F-F, are two different words to us. Tough, T-O-U-G-H, is the same as rough. Tough, T-U-F-F, means cool, sharp, like a tough-looking Mustang or a tough record. In our neighborhood, both are compliments. Steve flicked his ashes at me. What were you doing walking by your lonesome? Leave it to good old Steve to bring up something like that. I was coming home from the movies. I didn't think. No, you don't ever think, Darry broke in. Not at home or anywhere where it counts. You must think at school with all those good grades you bring home, and you've always got your nose in a book, but do you ever use your head for common sense? No siree, bub, and if you did have to go by yourself, you should have carried a blade. I just stared at the hole in the toe of my tennis shoe. Me and Darry just didn't dig each other. I never could please him. He would have hollered at me for carrying a blade if I had carried one. If I brought home B's, he wanted A's. If I got A's, he wanted to make sure they stayed A's. If I was playing football, I should be in studying. And if I was reading, I should be out playing football. He never hollered at Sodapop, not even when Soda dropped out of school or got tickets for speeding. He just hollered at me. Soda was glaring at him. Leave my kid brother alone, you hear? It ain't his fault he likes to go to the movies. And it ain't his fault the Socias like to jump us. And if he had been carrying a blade, it would have been a good excuse to cut him to ribbons. Soda always takes up for me. Darry said impatiently, when I want my kid brother to tell me what to do with my older kid brother, I'll ask you, kid brother. But he laid off me. He always does when Sodapop tells him to, most of the time. Next time, get one of us to go with you, Pony Boy, Two-Bit said. Any of us will. Speaking of movies, Dally yawned, flipping away his cigarette butt. I'm walking over to the nightly double tomorrow night. Anybody want to come and hunt some action? Steve shook his head. Me and Soda are picking up Evie and Sandy for the game. He didn't need to look at me the way he did right then. I wasn't going to ask if I could come. I'd never tell Soda because he really likes Steve a lot. But sometimes I can't stand Steve Randall. I mean it. Sometimes I hate him. Darry sighed, just like I knew he would. Darry never had time to do anything anymore. I'm working tomorrow night. Darry looked at the rest of us. How about y'all? 2-bit, Johnny Cake, you and Pony want to come? Me and Johnny will come, I said. I knew Johnny wouldn't open his mouth unless he was forced to. Okay, Darry? Yeah, since that ain't a school night. Darry was real good about letting me go places on the weekends. On school nights, I could hardly leave the house. I was planning on getting boozed up tomorrow night, 2-bit said. If I don't, I'll walk over and I'll find you. Steve was looking at Darry's hand. His ring, which he had rolled a drunk senior to get, was back on his finger. Did you break up with Sylvia again? Yeah, and this time it's for good. That little broad was two-timing me again while I was in jail. And I'll just stop there. So a long passage. I'm in chapter 1, and I got to page 14. So if you want to continue the story and see what happens next, you've got a really good first chapter where all the characters are introduced. So when I used to teach this class, I really did see a lot of what I saw when I was a teenager, but things are still the same here in North Adams. A lot of the students I've had over the years, their families really are their friends, and they spend a lot of time with their friends for whatever reason. They don't think their parents understand them. The parents don't understand them. You know, things they change, but they stay the same in some ways. So I do want you to get into this book. If it's something that you think you would like, please let me know if you have any questions. The references to Paul Newman and Will Rogers, and those are people that you may or may not remember when you were a kid. When they talk about switchblades, I actually had one when I was a kid. They're illegal, but they were like jackknives, but long jackknives, and you hit a button and the blade came out, for fighting, and that was the 60s. So I'm here with Bob Bouquet today, and I just want to let him have the floor a little bit. We're going to be looking at all of the spelling rules and things like that as we go through, and then get into some of our own writing. But Bob would like to update you all on a few things that have happened since we first met in our first class. So, going to Bob.
Thank you, Linda. We just have a couple of seconds left, so I'm going to be very quick. We are enrolling for the fall semester, as you can see from Linda's class here on the television station, but we do have classes that are happening online right now, and we're moving toward having face-to-face classes. So if you're interested in more information, you can call the office at 413-662-5386 and leave a message, and we'll get in touch with you. Or you can go to the website. It's www.mcla.edu/ABE, and you can fill out a form there to request additional information. Thank you and have a good day. That's okay.